I drive my car up to the lake as if there's someone to awake. I haven't been to bed for days, I live in a twilight haze. And I set my heart to the setting sun, and I hope that no one else has done it. And the drinks are never far, open up the bar. I miss you every single day. I wait until I stop your way. I hate the way I'm straight.
That's it, right?
Yeah, man.
Yeah, awesome.
Hey, so my product, I didn't finish what I was saying, but, well, our product, my product, I don't even have it on the shelf, is a banana jam.
Oh, I do like a good
Have
banana
you-
jam.
What do you mean, Jacob?
What? So they,
No
you
one
just-
ever says that. Everyone's like, banana jam? I've never heard of it.
No, I've definitely had a few banana jams. So they sell them sometimes at market. In fact, maybe I haven't seen it in New Zealand.
Ah.
Honestly, I think.
Where have you lived?
And so I moved back to New Zealand at the start of the year. So I used to live in Berlin, in Germany.
Oh, okay.
You had Simon on last week.
Yep.
So him and I both kind of lived in Germany at the same time.
Cool.
And I suspect that's where I saw it.
Yeah.
Because it's coming from recent memory. But yeah, my wife loves banana jam. So she'll buy it.
Is that
whenever
right?
She sees it.
Oh
yeah.
my gosh. You're literally one of the first people that have actually not been phased by me mentioning banana jam and not been like, what are you talking about?
Banana jam enthusiasts. We exist.
Okay, cool. Maybe I'll get t-shirts made up as well.
We exist.
The merch.
The banana boys.
Get on the merch. Yeah. Hey, look, welcome to our podcast, Jacob. And you're here to tell us all, not about your love of banana jam, but
I'm happy to. I'm happy to talk for an hour about
well,
it.
anyway, we do have this banana jam, and it's going to be amazing. It's kind of chunky. We're doing more of a banana marmalade.
Okay.
Yeah, it's got lime, which I think a lot of banana jams do have. Lime, cinnamon, banana, and rum.
So you reckon this has the potential to go viral?
Hopefully.
Right.
Yep, with your help.
With my help, with my massive influence, I will drive the banana jam sales.
Yeah. No, you're actually on the podcast to talk about Rough.app.
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about anything, but definitely the thing I'm working on right now is Rough. It's been a lot of work, so we've been working on it probably around 2 years on and off. We started the project as a completely different thing. But now it's become Rough.app, and it's, but yeah, I can definitely dig into kind of what motivated that project and how we got to where we are today. It'll be a long story.
Yeah, no, start off, because I've watched a little bit of your content and stuff online, and yeah, you talk about a program. So just start us off on the basics. You talk about a program called ShapeUp, or
so ShapeUp. I think ShapeUp is pretty fringe in the industry. So probably the best. I know that the people who watch this are probably not super technical, or they might be. I have no idea. They all love banana jam. It's just the only thing that links all us banana boys together.
That's right.
But it probably starts. ShapeUp kind of starts actually way before it ever was thought through, and it was in 2001. You've got this methodology called Agile. So methodology is like how you do stuff, right? And in software, these kind of 17, I think it's 17. There's a number of software engineers, and they come together and they say, hey, the way we're building software is broken, it's wrong. We want to come up with a new, better way. And they call themselves I think they called themselves the Agile Alliance, which is it sounds like a superhero kind of group. But they start this methodology called Agile, and so Agile, the whole idea behind Agile is that previously the way it would work is, hey, you want some software to be built. You would come to me and I would say, okay, write down every single thing you want, like every detail, write it all down, and then I'll go away and I'll bring it to the software engineers and we'll build it. And then I'll bring it back to you. And so the problem, that was called waterfall, that model.
Right.
So the problem with that model is that people don't know what they want. So
Yeah.
you will describe everything you want. Like, yeah. Once you make all this, it'll be perfect. And then when you sit down, you actually use it. You're like, actually, that's not quite what I was thinking.
Yeah.
And so the Agile Alliance, these 17 software engineers, they're like, okay, let's try something new. And they have this very loose kind of approach to it. And if I'm being honest, like the whole terminology around Agile has been so polluted that I'm sure somebody who's watching this will say, oh, no, wait, that's not what Agile was.
Right.
But Agile at its core was very, very simple. So it was something around constant iteration. So it was around iterative. So you say, oh, I want software to be built for the Pilgrim Cafe. So I'll be like, okay, I'll make a really crappy about page and a really crappy map page and be like, is this kind of what you mean? And then you say, oh, let's make the map look a bit better. Let's make the about page. And then over time you get to again. So iterative was a huge part of that. And other elements would be like, I'm pretty sure in the original Agile Manifesto they do talk about regular meetings of some sort. Like there's this thing called the daily stand-up where you all stand up together and you talk to each other, right? So Agile has these kind of core sets of principles. As we move forward in time, you get different flavors of Agile pop up. And so the most popular one that comes up is called Scrum.
Scrum.
Well, like a scrum, like a rugby scrum,
Yeah.
And so Scrum is much more prescriptive. It's like you have to do these stand-ups, you have to do these meetings, you have to do it in this cadence. You have these people within the organisation that work, and they have specific job titles and they do specific things. You even have a person called a Scrum Master, and person just makes you do Scrum properly, right? So it goes from this very loosey-goosey, like just kind of follow the basics.
They really should have called him the referee, I think.
Oh, yeah,
or the Dungeon Master.
Yeah, Dungeon Master has
I
a ring
would
about
have
it.
loved the Dungeon Master.
There's a similar thing going on there.
That would have been fabulous, they didn't. They went with Scrum Master. I have no clue who came up with Scrum, but it took off.
It sounds like private schoolboys, isn't it?
It could be. I don't think it has anything related to... I don't know.
Just a gaggle of people coming together and someone has to be in control.
I mean, is that a Scrum? Isn't a Scrum like you're vying for
kind
control?
And kind of an objective.
I was thinking rugby, but anyway, just a whole gaggle of people all crushed together.
I mean, that is life, isn't it? That's us.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, bro.
Humanity.
It's a great metaphor.
Like, the world. Hey, Milton, could I just grab... would you be able to switch off some of the fridges and stuff? I forgot to do all of them.
I like the ambient noise, though. Somebody will be listening to this to fall asleep. And they'll be annoyed that
what do they call that? ASMR.
ASMR.
Yeah.
That's pretty bad ASMR.
So, the sound of the Pilgrim fridge. So it's the design process, right?
Yeah, that's kind of the whole thing. Scrum kind of encapsulates like the whole tapestry of the activities that you do when building software. And so someone comes up with Scrum catches on, lots of teams start doing Scrum. Scrum is not as simple as Agile. So a lot of people start to get confused.
Yeah.
And so this is where stuff starts getting complicated. So there are some teams that are doing Scrum and love it, and they come out really well. There are some teams that are not doing Scrum well, and they're not loving it, but they look at all these other teams that are doing well, and they're like, what are we doing wrong? And so up rises this Agile consultant industry. Mm-hmm. And the Agile consultant industry has real misaligned incentives because they're here to get you to understand and do Scrum, specifically Scrum. I think Agile probably doesn't need that many consultants, correctly.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't help them if it's easy and simple.
No. Yeah.
It helps them if it's very complicated. And this is the bad actors, right? So there's a lot of really great Agile consultants out there who are awesome.
That's our coffee machine pump, which sounds awful. But anyway, continue.
I love it. I love it. So, so there's just a lot of bad actors in that industry.
Yeah.
And so they are seeking to make Scrum as complicated as possible in order to ensure this idea. Yeah.
And this happens in multiple industries, multiple areas, like the environment, it makes sense. You know, we want to look after the environment. I'm going to build this building over here. And then there's all these consultants and lawyers who just have built careers upon the, all of the ins and outs, the red tape. And, it almost seems like it's in their best interest to really draw it out.
Obfuscation, expertise, money, complexity.
All of that.
Etc.
So all of those kind of perverse incentives are at play in this. And then there's also just companies that are trying to make this thing work, but they really shouldn't try, like behemoth-sized organizations with just thousands of people trying to fit this, like trying to be really sleek and agile, and it doesn't really work for them. So everyone's kind of trying to square peg round hole this methodology into their companies.
Isn't it amazing? It's remarkable, because all of a sudden the focus is no longer on the product as such, but on a methodology.
On the process.
And the process. That's right.
Oh my God, you've cut through it so well. So that's exactly the problem. So
it's no longer centric. And even the customer is almost getting ignored. Potentially.
I can't believe how well you managed to get to that conclusion, because that's something that I think has taken a lot of people a lot of time, because that's the big complaint, is that Agile had these initial principles, like, hey, we want to just get out better software for customers, and over time it got morphed into this idea where we're just so focused on the process that we're not thinking about the product.
Person or the product.
You would make a fantastic Agile consultant.
It's all of the banana jam that I eat.
You too can understand concepts in the blink of an eye if you eat.
Well, I mean, I think Milton borrows a famous quote from someone, which is self-similar across scale. And I see analogies everywhere. And I'm just like, the same shit's happening over here, that's happening over here. But
that's from Terence McKenna. That just means atomic level is similar to the cosmological level. You know, like the atoms are similar to planets, that sort of thing.
I like that.
And you see it everywhere, self-similar across scale.
This is like that movie with Jim Carrey where he sees like the number 23 everywhere.
I haven't seen that film. Sounds cool though.
Probably a similar basis.
So where are we at? Like Shape Up?
So we're not at Shape Up.
No, we're not.
We're kind of in the current, in the last few years. So what's kind of happened is, as you astutely pointed out, we have kind of moved past the original place where Agile started. And so we're at this point where a lot of people out there, Agile is fine, Scrum is fine. They're both really good methodologies. But because they've been perverted by various industries and companies, people are left with just this sour taste around it. And that's kind of where we are today. So I'm going to talk about Shape Up, and Shape Up is something that kind of comes out of this. But Shape Up is not popular at all, right? So we're still in this thing where the vast majority of people think about Agile as this like heavy-handed process with a lot of consultants and a lot of ways to do things wrong, and then people talking about the process being incorrect, and then they're not building good software, and that's kind of in the back of people's minds when they think Agile now, which is terrible, because Agile's a wonderful way of working. But it's kind of been ruined. So that's Agile. So we've got this company. In the midst of all this, you've got this company called 37 Signals. So 37 Signals is famous in the software industry. There's these two bootstrapped founders, and they're very opinionated guys. They are very opinionated. They don't really use anyone else's software. They don't use anyone else's like code. They just kind of they wrote their own very, very popular programming framework, which is extremely popular to this day. And so over time, of course these guys do this. They don't use Agile. They kind of do their own way of working. And so they slowly come up with this different alternative approach, which they call Shape Up. And so Shape Up, the thing it does is it does a few things that are kind of out there. Probably the biggest one, the one that people find the most confronting, is that they have this concept of a cool down. And a cool down is 2 weeks. So you build, I'll step back a little bit. So you build for 6 weeks, you build a thing that you've planned to do for 6 weeks. And then you have 2 weeks of cool down where you do whatever you want. So undirected time. So if you imagine like you're a company, you're paying a bunch of highly paid software engineers a lot of money.
Yep.
You have to not tell them what to do for 2 weeks. They can do whatever they want.
But they're still working on the app.
Yeah, they can't like go
Yeah.
for a jog or something.
No.
I don't know.
Yeah.
But
Yep.
they have to work on the app, but they can do whatever they feel like doing on the app.
Yeah.
And so that's quite out there. Like Agile is not about that. Agile is about, you
Yep.
have very specific activities that you've planned and you're doing that. So that's one thing that's quite interesting with ShapeUp. The other thing that's quite interesting with ShapeUp is the 6-week cycle. So it's called ShapeUp because you shape things into you kind of understand
Form.
what you're going to do,
Yeah.
a form,
Yep.
and then you try to build those over 6 weeks, right? So you're not planning to like get all of the specs perfect, but you're kind of reasonably understanding what to do in the shaping stage, and then when you start building over 6 weeks, the team kind of understands what they're doing. So the 6-week cycle, it's called, and the 2-week cooldown are like the two big principles of ShapeUp.
Yeah.
And in order to do that, you need to shape things correctly.
Yeah.
So that's methodology-wise, kind of
yeah.
set the groundwork
Okay.
for what is going on.
Cool.
Again.
That sounds cool. I like the idea of that. I like the idea that two people are just kind of, allure into themselves to a certain degree. Often, like in the art world, for example, the greatest artists are sort of not appreciated perhaps at the time, and they have quite, what's that word, where it's not common in the culture. It's kind of unorthodox methods.
Outside the pale,
Yeah.
but also strongly opinionated but successful.
Yeah, and they sort of they're tapping into something else, and then they chuck it out there, and it sort of seems to come together to a certain degree. There's definitely weaknesses to it as well, obviously. You get quite a dictatorial kind of person or personality in charge, and that can not always be good or ever be good.
That's 37 signals. Like that's exactly how they run.
Yeah, but then I love the idea of the cool down period. Like when my wife is designing labels for the food, we're constantly kind of shaping it. She's tweaking it just forever. And then inevitably there will come a period of time where you kind of reach that threshold after a certain time. You're just sick of it. You put it aside and then you come back to it a couple of days later and you re-look at it with fresh eyes. Because, you can kind of lose the vision or lose the...
It's like you're reading from the ShapeUp handbook. It's
Yeah.
exactly what they talk about.
Well, yeah. So I like the idea of it.
Yeah.
And then this leads on to...
So this is... this methodology is still fringe, right? So
Yeah.
it's, but we at Run, so the company I work for, the company that I am employed by, Run, that does capacity planning. So it does, you've got a big company, 100 people, what are they all doing in 6 months' time, right? Like planning their time.
I see, yeah.
Have you got enough projects? Have you got enough people?
Yeah.
So the company I work for, Run, is 100% remote, right? And we are hitting issues with kind of the agile way of working, and we've kind of made our own kind of weird model for it. And then we realize, like, okay, there's kind of this thing adjacent to it that somebody's thought through, and they've written a book about it. Let's try that. And so we try ShapeUp. We love it. ShapeUp's it's transformative for us.
Cool.
At the same time we go to ShapeUp, we also go to a 4-day work week. Mm-hmm. And we also change kind of the way, like the tooling that we use at the same time. And so what's crazy about this is that from those kind of two main activities, so going to a 4-day work week and adopting ShapeUp, we see output across the software and the product teams go up significantly. So we remove a day that people work, and people get more done.
Yeah. But they're buying into the humans, the people in the organisation, and any one of those people may just have a brilliant idea or a certain way of looking at things that they're able to contribute. And then once that person's able to contribute, they there's such a valuable thing to do. Feel like, self-worth, all of that type of thing.
Yeah, impact. It's what gets us out of bed in the morning, right?
Totally. Yeah.
That and
like
the love of banana jam.
You're being acknowledged. Yeah, they're acknowledging you and your skills and what you have to offer.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it sounds really good.
So we adopt
But
that.
they also, the people somehow feel excited, inspired, and good.
Yeah.
And they want to produce. They feel valued.
That soft stuff, you know.
Yeah,
it's
all
really
that soft
important.
stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
It is.
And we see that, like in cool down, we see productivity go up quite significantly. So you've got the work that we've planned, and you've got the free work, and the free work, we get so many more things done because people are just self-directing. And so, like, it's totally also valid in cool down to kind of take it a bit easy as well. Like it's not like we're like, we got to get a lot of stuff done in cool down. Like we're very happy with engineers being a little bit more relaxed. Yeah. They never are. They're always getting way more stuff done.
And for some reason, it may just not be their thing, and that like the product that they're working on. How many products are you working on at a time? Are you working on numerous or just one?
Just one. So
just
Run,
one.
Yeah, Run is it's a single product. It's quite a large product. So we have I think 14 engineers outside of people that manage people.
Wow.
And so that produces over time. It produces a lot of code, a large product. So it's at some point probably next year we have to think about separating the products into different things.
The idea of cool down is just so good.
It is good.
It's so good. It just elicits a culture of like trust, and reduces anxiety and all that sort of stuff. I would assume, and that allows for creativity, inspiration to come forth, and all of that sort of stuff.
It's self-selecting. I think companies that can do shape up are probably good companies to work for because they have to swallow, the leadership has to swallow this idea that like, people are going to do whatever they want for 2 weeks.
Relinquish our grip.
Yeah, exactly.
Get rid of that micromanaging.
Yeah, it is. It's very anti-micromanaging.
Yeah, I've worked under a micromanager before. Man, it's freaking awful. And it's the complete opposite from the cool down period. It's the opposite dimension.
Yeah. I think we've probably all been.
Cool down is good.
Yeah, it's really good. So we adopt Shape Up. It's really good for us. What we do realise though over time is that there's a big difference between 37 Signals, the company that originally came up with it, and our company, and probably most normal companies. So 37 Signals is very dictatorial. So they are very founder-led, and they are saying, this is what we're doing. And the founders have a very heavy hand in that process.
Yeah.
We're not like that. So especially as we grow, we've noticed that becomes less and less tenable because kind of inputs are coming from all across the organisation, right? You might have a salesperson on a sales call who's like, well, this is a really interesting opportunity. You might have somebody who's talking to a customer about an issue that they're facing. You might have an engineer who's noticed some interesting like technical opportunity in the market. It's not really the founders who are kind of coming top down. And to be fair on 37 Signals, that's not really part of the book, but the way they operate is they lean into that quite a lot. And when we tried to do that, it just didn't work that well. So we ran into all these little problems going down that road, right? So we would come to the start of a cycle where we're trying to figure out what we're going to do for the next 6 weeks. And there'd be these things that we've shaped. So we've got the form of what we want to do. And we're like, we can do A, B, or C. And then someone's like, we need to do D. And we haven't prepped anything for it. And then we realize in the meeting, like, oh yeah, we really need to do D.
Yeah.
And then we start the cycle. We've got nothing prepared. And it just goes, it's a disaster. Or it's it doesn't go super well because we're now trying to shape it at the same time as we're building it. And it's all these kind of problems. And so we realize kind of, well, there's maybe a gap here, and the way 37 Signals operate is not the way everyone else necessarily operates. And so that environment, it's taken me a long time to get there, but that is the environment.
Yes. Yeah.
Which leads us to build Rough.app. So Rough is just around shaping, and it's around being very transparent and open and collaborative around shaping. We tried a lot of different tools out there to do this, and what we realized was there's no shortage of places to write stuff down. You can use a notepad, you can use a Google Doc, you can use like anything. It doesn't matter. What is very difficult is getting people to look at it. So let's say you have 3 weeks realistically, and you need to get the form of this thing ready so that a team of people can work on it for 6 weeks, right? So de-risk a bunch of stuff, go interface with people in the organisation to figure out the requirements for it, It's a lot of work. What happens is if you use, let's say Google Docs for this, what you need kind of a full-time shaping person. And they're going to book calendars in everyone's days.
Yeah.
I'm going to talk to you. I'm going to figure out the
Yeah.
requirements. I'm going to talk to the engineering team. I'm going to figure out the requirements. I'm going to go back to you. I'm going to blah, blah, blah. I'm going to go back to the other. And we just sat there and we're like, can't these people just talk to each other? Like, this is ridiculous.
Yeah,
You've kind of got this central point. And then all of that leads to this big black box where the decisions are kind of being held within someone's brain.
Yeah.
And no one knows why we're doing it.
Yeah.
And so it just ended up being
Inadvertently,
immense.
that person becomes the dungeon master.
The dungeon master, exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that became a real problem for us. And, yeah, we noticed that we'd come to the start of a cycle and things weren't shaped, and the reason was like, well, I couldn't get a meeting with this person at the right time. And it just felt weird, and I think it was because of this top-down approach that Shape Up has.
Yeah.
And it didn't fit with the way we were working.
Yeah, so it was, getting all tied up, and logistically it was kind of stumbling a little bit. So, okay.
So we were like, okay, why does nobody engage with all these things to write stuff down? Like, what's wrong with Google Docs? Why can't you just go check the Google Doc every few days? Yeah. And so we did. We talked to a lot of people about this from a lot of different companies. And we realized it was really easy and simple. It's like there's nothing in it for them.
Right.
What do they get out of it?
Yeah.
So right now, the product manager has to go and book a call, because why else would the person go randomly check a pitch for an upcoming piece of work?
See. And it's just, how many pages would it be? Like, how long is it? How big is it?
Probably a good pitch would be 2 to 3 pages.
Yeah.
That's all you need to start a cycle of work. But the problem isn't that, it's the back and forth. So if I get everybody, if I'm like slowly building up a pitch and I'm like, okay, engineering's happy, sales happy, I'll just go talk to somebody or go talk to the executive team, the CEO. And the CEO's like, oh no, we'll have to change this. Now I have to go back to sales.
Someone kind of has to edit it or put in a footnote.
Yeah. And then everyone else has to kind of sign off on that change or put their things. And that's like once you start collaborating on these things, you just end up doing them in lockstep. And so they just don't get done by the time you need to start them. And what inevitably happens is that people start weighing in way later. So you've started the cycle, you're halfway through building it,
right.
and then the CEO will come in and be like, oh, this isn't what I wanted at all. Or, and then you get people in because they can see it and there's something in it for them. There's a cost associated, because if that goes live, they're like, no, I don't want to deal with the outcomes there. So we noticed that. We're looking at the different tools that you can use in order to facilitate this. And we realized they've all tacked on this kind of collaborative element after the fact. They've all been like, oh yeah, you can, your Google Docs, blah, blah. And also you can do it together. It's like, yeah, but you're still not incentivizing anything.
Yep. It's not appealing at the moment, is it?
Yeah, it's not enjoyable for anybody to actually use this.
No.
And so then we took another step back and we're like, what motivates anybody to engage on stuff? And it's exactly what you said before. Fantastic at cutting through the subtext here. It's impact. Impact. People want to feel impactful.
Right. Contribution and stuff. Yeah. Yep.
So that's what we built. So we built that. So the way that Rough works is that we're very against the grain of traditional tooling. We are thoughts and feelings driven.
Yeah.
So we take people's thoughts and feelings, and it has to be a person. We don't do AI summaries or any of that stuff. Thoughts and feelings from people, and we connect them together so that they can talk to each other. And then when we want to create a pitch, we want to shape something, we pull in, we use kind of like a storage model that AI uses. So we use kind of a similar technology. We pull in all of those thoughts and feelings together to a pitch, and we say, hey, look at all the impact you're having. Come and make your voice heard over here, because your voice is important to the health of the business. Yeah. And so that drives people to engage in these things naturally, so PMs don't have to book a dozen meetings into their calendars. Yeah. And at the end of the day, they feel like they're having an impact on the business. So
that sounds like a kind of a rich tapestry of ideas, doesn't it? It sort of sounds like a mosaic. Everyone's kind of chipping in and
it's going back to the human system.
Yeah, it's natural.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's a PM?
Oh, sorry, a product manager.
A product manager. Right,
Yeah.
Yep.
Or a project manager, I guess. That's kind of.
Yes. Yeah, cool. And people value different things as well. Like what I find rewarding, someone else might not find rewarding or whatever. Yeah. So it's complex, man.
It is complex, yeah.
Yep.
And basically the insight we had here was we realised how a lot of people want to think that their decisions are driven by data, or that they've got these like cold hard facts on their side.
Yeah.
They're not. Like most decisions, even in like the highest
No.
level, massive businesses, they're driven by emotion.
Totally.
But there's nowhere to put that emotion. Right now it's...
Okay. So how do people input these ideas? Is it just by words, or are they like,
So we're still quite early, right? So we don't have like a million different ways to do it. So we have a couple of integrations. So there's some tools that people use, like Slack would be something that people use day to day. And you can directly put them into Rough at the moment. But this is something that, we want to kind of integrate with wherever people are. Again, we're recognizing this idea of like, we have to give them something. So if they're using a specific thing that they, if you're a salesperson and you use a tool like HubSpot, which might be foreign to everyone here, but essentially if you're using a specific tool for your job, we want to be there so that wherever they're having thoughts about stuff, we're also there.
Yeah, because they may be using different tools to express themselves, and you're just wanting to capture that expression.
So we are thoughts and feelings driven development.
That is pretty interesting, man, because I think it sounds like natural and good and far out.
So we've got a problem though. The problem we have is we've...
Too many thoughts and feelings, or what?
Well...
What's your problem?
The problem is it's not a good idea for a business to run super broad. You want it to
too loose.
Focus.
Yeah.
Yeah, who has thoughts and feelings and who has priorities.
Right.
Like just frickin' everyone, every business out there. And so we've got this kind of extremely broad solution now.
Okay.
Like I used it to plan a Christmas party.
Okay.
Right? So
Cool.
because it's like, let's get everyone's thoughts and feelings in here and then we'll figure out the priorities based on those.
Yeah.
So now we're kind of...
Like, it's democracy. What was that T-shirt that the chef used to wear, Brad? He had like a plane, I think it could have been an album cover, a plane like dropping bombs saying...
I'm not sure.
Democracy rules, or something like this. It's kind of...
Sometimes democracy can be a bit difficult.
We forget about the bad things associated with democracy, right?
Which is why I think America, constitutional republic, for that very reason, perhaps.
Yeah.
Could be.
Yeah, I think so. But anyway.
Yeah, but that's a problem. And also we don't... I mean, I don't even believe in the idea of democratically choosing what to do next.
No.
I just believe in the emotional part, like pulling people into the conversation. But like, I actually am a huge fan of strong leadership. So I think good companies are built from strong leadership. Yeah. But the communication piece is the real problem. Like you can make a decision here, right? You can be like, we're going to do this next. Getting every single person in like a 200-person company to be on the same page about that takes, months. But then if you change the decision now and then, which is normal, you're allowed to change priorities.
I've got another analogy, Jacob, of which is one that I heard once upon a time. I didn't come up with it. But, when people are growing trees and people get really into growth, say, and they get a little bit and sort of just focused on the growth. And the growth of a tree or a weed or a plant or a garden, say, it can just go anywhere and you'll get growth. And then you need a gardener to come in and kind of train that growth into what is profitable or productive, especially with fruit trees, right?
Interesting.
Especially with fruit trees.
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, obviously you can have a pretty garden without any fruit trees, just a flower garden, which you still want to, you need to control the weeds and you need to let the plants kind of flourish. And that growth isn't sort of just unlimited, unbridled kind of growth. It's kind of carefully manicured. And with a fruit tree, to get a lot of fruit, often, gardeners do crazy stuff. Sometimes they keep the tree in a sort of almost like a a sexually reproductive kind of stage, like a teenager kind of stage, and the tree just keeps on producing fruit, right?
Really?
Like I talked to a hazelnut farmer, I think, and they keep the trees in a sort of a stage where they just produce fruit. I don't think that's not very natural.
Wait, is
but
hazelnut a fruit?
No.
Okay.
Sorry, I switched quite quickly between my fruit and my nuts without any warning. So I'm just talking about
Your nuts.
yeah.
Because cashew nuts are a fruit, right?
Are they?
Yeah. If you look at a photo of a cashew nut, it's like the fruit is this big, and the cashew is this big at the top.
Just one?
Yeah,
What?
it's
No
a little
way.
thing that grows at the top.
Oh my gosh,
Yeah,
I had no idea.
That's why cashew milk is really bad for the environment.
Yeah.
Because you're making this. But also, what's great is like in like indigenous societies, they eat the fruit part, right?
Yeah.
And they export the cashew.
Oh, classic.
And luckily, like white people haven't figured out that they can eat the fruit. Otherwise, we'll be removing, a bunch of food. We'll be creating a bunch of food scarcity in some third world country.
Yeah, potentially.
So don't make cashew fruit jam.
No. But I reckon there's something in that analogy, because you do. There at the end of the day, you want the fruit, right?
Mm.
Yeah, you want the goods, and it's not just all for fun. It's not just for crazy growth, but you want it to be trained in a certain way.
Yeah, there's a lot of talk about growth in like the startup environment. Like, is growth like good? Is focusing on growth good? Is it bad? I am actually probably against the social grain here, which is that I love high growth companies. Mm-hmm. So I think that when you're part of a high growth company, it is invigorating. Like, it's an amazing experience.
Yeah.
And I do think it's kind of growth solves all problems with most
Yep.
early stage companies, right?
Yeah.
I think the problem kind of comes out when you get these behemoth, like Microsoft sized companies that are trying to eat up like entire markets just in order to fuel growth.
Yeah. That's not kind of growth in some respects. Yeah.
Yeah, like their shareholders see money go up. So I guess that's important to them.
Well, yeah, you can measure growth in terms of like ideas maybe, or like innovation, your innovation could be growing and you could be coming up with new products all the time, or, breaking kind of pushing back the boundaries, right? As opposed to necessarily just money, right?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, it comes from, I think, a lot of like your values as a company, and then I think how much capital you've taken on. So there's a huge difference between like that company I mentioned before, 37 Signals. That's a bootstrap company. The founders own that company, whereas most companies are not like that, right? Like that's a privilege to be able to create a massive company entirely bootstrapped. Most companies out there, they need capital early, they take on investment, and that kind of dilutes the value system that they may have. And so investors are like, well, we want an exit, or we want dividends, or we want there's some reason they gave you money.
It's an artificial boost of freaking hormones or adrenaline, and all of a sudden, that baby's getting freaking testosterone pumped into it.
Yeah, and then that's like the
growing
market
muscles.
we're in as well.
Yeah.
We can't not do that.
No, I suppose not. Yeah, because otherwise, just takes freaking forever.
Well, it's like, it's just the problem with like the global market. So if you're really dedicated to making, I don't know, banana jam, and you're making a really good product and you're slowly growing, and then freaking Starbucks comes along with Starbucks banana jam, and you're really serious at competing with Starbucks on like a global scale, then you need capital to fight them, right?
Yeah.
You can't just be like, we'll just keep growing slowly, because they'll probably crush you with marketing, or something. They'll use their capital in some way to
and that's not business. I used to kind of have a problem with that, but then also I think of the law of the jungle, and I'm like, well, the lion
it's
wants
ruthless
to
out
eat
there. It's ruthless out there.
eat
so
the zebra.
We
right?
had this problem a lot. So we really wanted to make Rough open source. That was a big part of both I haven't even talked about my co-founder George, who's incredible and an amazing person, by the way.
I can't believe you haven't mentioned
I haven't
George.
mentioned him at all. I was too caught up in the storytelling of agile and stuff. But George Sabania, he is an incredible engineer. So I've worked with him at my previous company. So this is my second startup, by the way. So my first startup, I had George, and George was like the best engineer I'd ever met. Still the best engineer I've ever met, and he's an amazing person. He's also the godfather of my son. So,
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So we're very close, and I respect him so much, and he's just such a fantastic engineer. So everything we have at Rough is because of him. I feel bad for not mentioning him earlier, but everything we have is because George is a genius, and so he's been able to build these things, these systems that a lot of people would maybe be like, that's not really possible for someone to build. Like, you need a team to build that.
Gee whiz.
It's only because George is so incredible.
Does sound freaking amazing.
Where did he pick all this up?
So he's one of those self-taught programmers who
right.
He never went to university. He's just amazing.
Yeah.
Maverick.
Cool.
He is a maverick.
Yeah. I love Mavericks.
That's good. So he's got some of those same qualities that the 26, what is it?
37 seconds.
37 Signals has.
Yeah, he actually does.
Like there's it's not without weaknesses, but I love that type of energy and that type of person.
Yeah, George is the type of person, he does things that I would view as insurmountable. So I'll be like, oh, well, this library sucks, I don't like it. And he's like, cool, I'll rewrite it from scratch. And I'm like, George, this was like 10,000 lines. You can't just rewrite this thing. And then he'll do it, and he'll do it in like a day.
Wow.
He's and these are every single person I know who knows George has stories like this about George.
Yeah.
Like George will do things that are not possible regularly.
Yeah.
And I think so we both work together at Rough.
That possibly is something that he values deep down, like the challenge and the thing.
Being magic. Yeah. People will go to George for magic. They'll be like, hey, George, I just want this impossible thing done. And he's like, oh, yeah, I think we can do that. So, yeah, George is amazing. And that a lot of the way we got is George and I share very similar philosophies, and we really wanted to make the product open source. It was something that we talked about a lot. And then I went and talked to a bunch of different other companies that were open source. And I'm like, do you guys know what open source?
Does it just mean that other programmers are allowed to contribute towards...
Yeah, the source code's up.
Yeah.
You can copy it, you can do whatever you want with it.
And they can build onto it and take it in a different direction?
Yeah, 100%.
Yep.
So we were like, okay, that seems like a cool model, and like we're very open, transparent people, and that's not something that we have any problem with.
Yeah.
So let's explore this idea and talk to other companies that have done it. So and this is related to this law of the jungle thing, right? So I went and talked to some companies, and the conclusion was, don't do it. And the reason was that people are scum. So you can make your product open source, and you can put a license there. There's a nice license out there which says you're allowed to use the source code for anything you want except to compete with us.
Oh, okay.
You can't just make a competing product. That's
right. Yeah.
And so we talked to lawyers, we talked to other people, and they said, people are just going to, like some dude from like, I don't know, Canada or something, they're just going to fork it, and they're going to make a competing product. And what are you actually going to do about it?
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, that's so true. And so he's like, the only way, and I talked to some big companies that have done this, open source, the only way to be open source, free, like this kind of, is to have a lot of money behind you so that you can build a bit of a moat, like a branding moat, a marketing moat, be like, we're this company. And if somebody was to copy it, it would be like, you could use your influence to say, these guys copied us, that's not okay. But when you're small, people don't care that much. So
no.
Yeah.
I worked for MacPack when it was made in Christchurch. Started off in Christchurch, and they were world leaders in camping equipment, tents, sleeping bags, backpacks, all of that type of thing. And they had a lot of competitors, big international companies, and Bruce was a pretty brilliant man, and he got his packs into the hands of the people at the top of the game, like the people who were going to do the expeditions to Everest and Antarctica and do all of these very intrepid things. He didn't want to start at the bottom and work his way up. He was like, I'm going to get my products into the hands of these guys, and other people will see it, and then it will sort of filter its way down. And it worked, and they became kind of world leaders, but they were very small. And when they released a new harness for a pack that was groundbreaking, the first people that would buy it would be a competitor. And they would take that pack back to their business and they would pull it apart, and then they would, so many months later, they would develop this fantastic pack with a harness, which maybe there was a few differences and blah, 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 blah. And his attitude was, we always want to be the people who, other people are stealing shit off of. We want to be the leaders. We never want to be those people who are frickin' copiers. So we're always going to, be in front.
Almost all successful companies have that mindset.
And they kind of wanted this ownership. And I suppose, so putting it out there in podcast form or something like that, you've got a certain date. Like, we published this here. We came up with it, guys. Here it is. But it's, it's still not without problems. I mean, the competition was really great. Politically, there were tariffs coming off and all this type of thing. And they did have to move offshore. The manufacturing all moved offshore. And but they're still around today, but it's certainly changed quite a lot.
Has their philosophy changed, though? Are they still leaders?
Don't know. Yeah, Bruce is no longer there. I mean, like you say, once perhaps that owner leaves or the business gets sold to a whole bunch of shareholders, other interests, the values system is gradually sliding and changing.
Yeah.
And I think that has happened once it's left the private thing. So there is a strength in that smallness. Like, you have one of the strengths that a small business has is the speed. Like, it's got more speed than a big business. Yeah.
So what's your stance now on whether to be proprietary or open source?
We'd love to be open source, but we need to already have a decent amount of customers and have a lot of capital behind us. In order to have enough of a brand presence to make somebody think twice about it. Because now what's funny is that we're bootstrapped, right? So we have no money. We're doing it part-time. Like, we're doing it on the side of our day jobs. And if we put that out there, it's it's like over a year of work, of like hard work to put this out there. Somebody in a different country out there can take all of our code and then go to a venture capitalist and say, hey, our competitive advantage against these dudes that made it is that we don't have to make it. We can spend 100% of your money on marketing. And we can't do that because we have to make the product. So just at the point where we're at, it's just very risky. But fast forward a few years and we're, giant. I think I'd really love to make the product open source. I just don't see...
Not yet,
I don't see a lot of value in the code.
Well,
I think it's...
Have you heard Zuckerberg kind of talk? I mean, he started Facebook, obviously, right? And at that time, anyone could have done it. I don't know. He does. I've heard him specifically talk about this thing, how he just kept on going, and he was just so surprised that the other businesses weren't doing what he was doing, and he just kept on going forward. And by the time anyone did, and everyone told him, it's freaking ridiculous. It's not going to work. There's no money in it, and he just kind of, I don't know, ignored all that stuff and just kept on steering his own ship in the direction he wanted to go.
Yeah, because it's emotional. It's not.
Yeah.
And this is why in the startup space, there's this big idea that like companies are built from surfacing really interesting trends and data, and then you build a company. And I'm I know
or problems. Yeah.
Maybe problems, but like I don't know a single founder that did that. That looked at a trend in data and was like, oh, I'm gonna capitalize on this opportunity. It was always driven by usually anger. They encountered something, they hated it so much that they put years of their life into a solution completely irrationally. And if you were to pitch that at a company level and be like, let's do this, they'd be like, okay, how do we de-risk this? It's like, you can't, because it's an emotional thing. So I think most founders, and this happens a lot in like, especially venture capital conversations, they're like, what's stopping Google from doing this? And I'm like, Google can do freaking anything. Like, they have unlimited money and people, but they don't do it because they need things that aren't risky, So like, startups, the reason startups exist is because we do things that are risky. that are not maybe logical at the time.
Yeah.
And then after the fact, people look back and be like, yeah, so they did something they were really passionate about. Everyone said that, like, they shouldn't do it.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, that's how most great companies are formed. They're formed through raw emotion.
I think so. Yeah. And it taps into the whole what you're wanting to get out of people anyway. Like, you're wanting every single person to be contributing on like the Rough.app. You're wanting them to be their own little kind of founder type of thing.
Yeah. Exactly.
Have ownership of that idea, put it forward.
Just feel something, you know? We just feel their heartbeat a couple of times.
They call that like the marketplace of ideas, I think, do they? Like, have you heard of that term?
I have heard of that.
Yeah. It's kind of this thing, and it will sort of, the shit ideas kind of get knocked out.
I mean, it's an intuitive level of data, I suppose, which is a lot different from the lineal sort of engineering metrics.
Because you can't
Does
get
that
upset.
make sense, what I just said?
Yeah, I do think that as companies grow, they become ever increasingly more bureaucratic, and everything becomes cold and isolated, and they don't remember that the whole inception point of their company was much more fluffy. Like, it was a lot of like talking and being like, yeah, this feels right. And so they forget that, and that's why I think a lot of big companies just can't innovate, is that they try to do things in this very cold, rigid way. Like, go talk to these people, and like they have like a framework or a process around innovation. Whereas innovation is a lot like it's much looser.
It's more hunches and gut feelings and all that sort of stuff.
And you've got to have probably a whole bunch of failures, make a lot of mistakes. Some of the products are going to be kind of just total duds. There was an organisation that used to have a gun on top of their roof. I can't remember who it was. It was one of these,
Did you say a gun?
Yeah, like a cannon. And whenever someone did a monumental fuck up, they would go to the top of the building and they would let this cannon off. It didn't fire.
That's good.
Obviously a round, but it just massive explosion. So that everyone in the company knew, oh man, someone's stuffed up. But also, it's like, let's celebrate those stuff ups, because once they're out of the way, it's kind of like we can move on. And let's face it, that's just part of it. We can't eliminate.
I want one of those.
We can't eliminate those.
I want one of those on Pilgrim.
Yeah, man.
You screwed up the cake yesterday, didn't you?
Oh man, yeah. And it would have felt so good if I could have freaking just made a great big explosion.
Display it, tell everybody.
Have a cake wall, just throw all of your mistakes.
Fire. It's kind of like the rock star throwing the old school TVs out the hotel windows.
Mate,
you guys are like,
they're like the height of their success, and they're just wanting to destroy shit.
Yeah.
Have a cake cannon. Fire that cake out of that cannon.
That's genius. There you go. See, that stuff, that just came from the heart.
You just make up crap by just yapping and talking, and suddenly a bit of a good idea crops up.
And all of a sudden, Pilgrim's known, not for the food or the coffee.
But the cake cannon, we were talking about this before, you need something that can go viral.
Exactly. People love the story. They feel that emotional connection, which the cake cannon.
Yeah, and they feel shit when they make a stuff up, and they... Yeah.
And they want to tell their friends, we went to that place with the cake cannon, all that sort of thing. It's an emotional thing.
Yeah, it's a great idea. So I like, and this is kind of how I view the kind of landscape going forward as well of products. It's like, what's AI going to take over? I have no idea. But like at the end of the day, we're always going to build products for human beings. Yeah. And there's that sense of connection that underpins most things that we build. Yeah. And so that's the thing I want to lean into. Like, I don't care if AI takes over programming or takes over these hard skills. It's like the thing we'll always be doing is discussing ideas and seeing how we can connect with people better. And that's what I want to lean into. It's like build products for people, for humans, using humans, and like use the AI however you want. I don't care. But like at the end of the day, we do stuff because we want human beings to engage with it in some way. So I see that kind of rising above the kind of AI, whatever AI does. I suspect that we'll be okay because it's above that.
So there's still that, going back to that whole process of collating all the the thoughts and feelings, and Dave gave the example of fruit trees and weeds. Can we go back to there and talk about how do you collate all that sort of stuff?
Yeah, so this is really interesting. So this is the technology aspect of we have some really cool tech. What we do is like, there's some quite cutting edge stuff that we use. But probably the most interesting thing is we use this thing called vector embeddings.
We heard this last week.
We did.
Vector embedding. Yeah, mate.
Oh, did Simon talk about
Yeah,
it?
Simon mentioned vector embedding,
Oh, that's fantastic.
but he just glossed over it, and I thought,
I can dig into it.
That sounds bloody interesting.
It's really cool. So a vector embedding is, let's say, like traditionally the way that you store data is you'll take, let's say, like a word. In programming we call it a string. That's what a word is called.
Oh, yeah.
So we'll take a string, and let's say the string is pilgrim, and we'll put that into like a data store somewhere, a database. And so if somebody was to want to find pilgrim, they might say PIL or GRIM, and we will say like, some part of that word intersects with this other part of the word, and so we can source this piece of information, right? So that's great. That's how most searches work. So along comes AI, and the problem space of AI is that it can't just do that, right? It needs to know that if I say, what does Pilgrim sell? It knows that Pilgrim is a cafe that sells coffee and delicious banana jam. So it needs to understand more than just the word. It needs to understand all the contextual cues around that word.
Yep.
And so a vector embedding, a vector is like a point in space. I think space-time, I guess. Or it's a point in multi-dimensional space,
Yep.
right? And so the way that a vector embedding works is we have to create a vector for a word or a phrase. And this is where it gets a bit mind-bending, is that the number of dimensions that vector is going to inhabit is like in maybe the thousands. So you're not thinking like X, Y, Z. You're thinking every letter of every alphabet. And so it's like when we store data in Rough, we embed everything. So this is kind of expensive, honestly, like embedding everything, like computationally, it's somewhat expensive. But we basically say every single thing that anybody writes anywhere in the app, it will be embedded as per its context. It's context aware. So if somebody says pilgrim and somebody says coffee, we can link those things together. And this is where the technology gets really weird, is that we don't know the limits of this. So we say, George and I always talk about the fact that we're on the wagon. So it's like we don't know where the wagon's going, but we know we're on the wagon.
Right.
So we're hoping that this technology improves so that the context becomes better and better over time. So if somebody says pilgrim and somebody says joy, it links them together, like it gets even more intrinsic. But this is kind of where the technology gets murky, and we're not quite sure of the edges. And we're constantly iterating on that. But that's how vector embeddings work, and that's what lets us do this kind of loose aggregating of things together and connecting people and do all that stuff. It's the whole reason the product can exist.
Thanks for explaining that. It's well explained.
Oh, thank you.
Which shows that you probably know what you're talking about.
I mean, I'm just parroting stuff that George has actually done. I'm just kind of sitting. I understand it, but he's the one who's doing the hard stuff, I have to say.
But all those, the multidimensionality of the string and all the all the different contexts, it just becomes murky at the edges. Like just goes off into a fog.
Well, it's also just not not that great yet. Like the models that we use, it gets kind of complex because what we need to do is because... So some of the stuff is very expensive, right? So when you embed a piece of information, there is ChatGPT. Everyone's heard of ChatGPT. You can go and ask OpenAI to embed that data for you. And it's got a really great embeddings model that it uses, but it's slow. And so with Rough, people are constantly editing information. Like we're like getting a pitch together, right? So we might have 10 people editing the same document, trying to shape this thing so that it's good. So we need to be constantly querying, re-embedding every single piece of information. And if we did that with OpenAI, it would cost us thousands and thousands of dollars. So we need it to be also very fast and very cheap. So we use like a very light model that we put in our server cluster. So we kind of control it. And so that probably has limitations as well. So the issue we have is just stuff that we know should be linked, but it's not. And I think that's just the limitation of the model. It's just not correctly putting them in the right place.
Do you have to physically type in everything that you want to be linked?
No, it'll all do it.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, sorry, yeah, you have to it has to exist.
You have to physically type in each one of those contexts. Or, like you said,
you don't want Pilgrim to be related to like shit or something like that.
So
yeah.
So it might be by accident. Like, that's the thing. We don't control the actual model.
Yeah.
That's been trained on like a data set of billions of pieces of text, and so we have no idea how it's going to link everything, where it's going to place it.
I see.
Okay.
So that's
the benefit of that is, what is the benefit of that? That these things are all kind of linked. When 10 people are inputting words, even if it's just 10 words in one thing, like what does it then kind of produce? Like what is the benefit of having those 10 words kind of... Is that... Yeah? Is that a good question or not?
So the benefit of structuring data so that it's context aware is that now we can connect people that normally wouldn't be connected. So they might be using like different vocabulary in their different domains. So you might have somebody in sales who might talk about prospects and outreach and things like that, and then you might talk about someone in engineering who might talk about customers and users, and they're actually talking about the same person.
Yeah.
But only through context will you figure that out.
Yeah.
And so we can connect those two people who may never, ever speak to each other, ever, and be like, you're talking about the same problem. Mm-hmm. If you spoke together about this problem, you might realise that it's related to this thing over here.
Yep.
And maybe that is going to be really valuable for the business, or maybe even none of that. You just feel like your voice matters. And only through connecting these people can we do that. And I mean, also, just even if we just connect people, that's fantastic. That's awesome. Like,
so it's expanding the neural network.
Yeah, it is essentially like a network of information. That, and for us, it's always really important to keep in mind that it's human beings that we're connecting. So the information only serves as a mechanism to connect humans to other humans, so that they can talk to each other. But yeah, it is really cool. And the dimensions, when you like really dig into
wild.
it.
Wow.
Yeah, the dimensions will be something like effervescence will be like a dimension of the 1,000-dimensional thing. Like, oh yeah, this is like 0.04 of effervescence. Like that.
Whoa.
Yeah, but you can't really understand as like a person. You can't understand each dimension. The dimensions are always an abstract of whatever the model has created. So we might think effervescence, but it's actually just some number in a computer somewhere.
I love that.
Yeah.
0.04% effervescence. That's how I'm feeling today.
That's a T-shirt.
Yeah, that is interesting. So does it? And then what is the output? Does it kind of collate it all in a sort of a easy to digest kind of form?
We don't actually have the higher level collation yet. We haven't thought through exactly how that's going to work. The way we do it at the moment is it's very social media-esque. So if you have a thought, if you're saying like, I keep burning the cake, then it will say, hey, 3 months ago, a customer was talking about a burnt cake. And you might just, it'll just surface that data.
Yeah.
It might surface 5 or 6 pieces of data.
Yeah.
And you might say like, we already talked about this a long time ago. So that's it. There is definitely a thing we could do, which is pulling it up a level and say, hey, over the last month, here's the trends of the way people are speaking. But we're very careful about that because that's, again, almost dehumanizing that relationship and turning it back into data again.
Yeah.
So for us, it's very important to keep that emotion in the conversation and keep that feeling there. And we haven't quite figured out how we're going to resolve that aggregation step.
All right. Oh man, I'm at the limit of my understanding about it, but far out.
Wow, thanks for letting me talk about
it. Super interesting, and I can see why you're into that. Man, it's such a complex.
It's really fun,
but
that's right.
You're dealing with the human systems.
Yeah. No, it's a really cool piece of tech, and I mean, it's great. It feels good using this thing for good, like using it to connect humans again. Not like we're going to take people's jobs or anything. It's like this could be used in order to form like real human connection.
I think that's where we always have to come back to that. Otherwise, we're just going to be living a hollow life. So we've talked about the psychological safety of people. I was just reading one of your blogs, and it said 2 things to focus on creating great teams: psychological safety, which we've talked about, and ikigai.
Oh, ikigai.
Yeah, mate.
I can talk about ikigai.
Yeah, just maybe quickly.
Okay. So one of the, like, I love philosophy. It's like a big thing or ethics maybe more specifically. And so I think a lot about like purpose and how what creates fulfillment in people. And some of that is kind of seen through Rough.app and some of it is not. But I firmly do not believe in measuring people's performance in any specific way. Mm-hmm. So I just don't think, maybe if you're like a line worker and you're, I don't know, stamping Christmas trees on a thing and you can say like, oh, you've done this many Christmas trees over this amount of time. But I just don't believe in that, especially for knowledge work. Like you can't, for instance, I don't know, measure a podcaster's ability to talk. Correct. What would even that look like, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm much more in favour of maybe trying to measure things that are completely immeasurable, but still trying to work on those, because that's really what creates high-performing people. So ikigai is this Japanese concept, which basically means fulfillment. And I'm so totally going to misremember it, but it's doing something that you are passionate about, like that you love. It has to be something that you're good at. And it has to have an impact on the world, and you have to be able to, I think, make money from it. I think those are the 4 concepts. And then once those all come together, that person feels fulfilled. And so my theory is that a business should focus on measuring those things, even though they're immeasurable. But try to measure those things. And then my theory is that by maximizing those measurements, you will create much more productive people, much more productive than if you tried to measure the output. So you're like, are you fulfilled? Are you doing what's something you're good at? Are you getting paid for it? Are you making an impact on the world? And if you could answer all those things, be like 100% yes, that person's probably going to outperform 99.9% of the population. So that's, I guess, what I say to people who are running businesses is like, stop optimizing for low performers. Stop thinking about like metrics and performance programs and all these stupid things. Like, optimize for high performers, because what I've learned from my wonderful co-founder George is that a high-performing person will outperform anyone by like 10 times. Like George is 10 times more productive than a not very good engineer out there, maybe more, and that's crazy. But I'm very confident of that, and I bet if anybody who's watching this podcast knows George, they will write in the comments, "I know George," and that is true.
Sweet, man. That's a good place to end.
That's awesome. Yep.
Yeah. Cheers, Jacob.
Yeah, thanks for having me on,
cheers,
guys.
mate.
It was really fun.
Cool. Thanks.
Awesome.
Bye-bye.